So, yeah, can you give an explanation for everyone about what cash is and what accrual is, just so everyone can have the same base knowledge? Just not everyone knows.
Sure, sure. So, cash and accrual are just two different viewpoints that relate to timing of income and expenses. On an accrual basis, you're matching the sales you had in a time period with the expenses that relate to those sales. So, in Amazon, for example, you might have a sale on December 31st, but you don't get paid for that until January. So on an accrual basis, it would count as a December sale. On a cash basis, it would count when you actually got the money sometime in January. And by the same token, the product that you sold on December 31st, you may have actually bought back in June, right? And that took you all the way till December before you sold that particular piece of inventory. On an accrual basis, we count the expense in December when you sold it. On a cash basis, we count it back in June when you bought it. So in an e-commerce situation, because you're always, particularly, right, if you're growing, you're
Hmm.
buying more and more inventory. On a cash basis, if we count that inventory when you buy it, even though you haven't sold it yet, we're just pulling that expense forward or into the present rather than pushing it out to the future and offsetting the income from today for inventory that you're not going to get paid for 3 months, 6 months down the road. So in a growth situation, it really can bring down the profit that you have to report on a tax form and thus reduce your tax bill. It doesn't change whether or not you're making money in the business or not. It's really just an issue of when it gets reported from a timing standpoint. And
Hmm.
just that one change can often mean the difference between a big tax bill and no tax bill.
No, very cool. Um, do you also, if you're doing bookkeeping, do you also provide, if you're doing, even if you're doing cash-based reporting to the government, to the authorities, can you still also provide accrual books? Because the accrual books are the most useful books.
Right, so that is exactly what we do. Every month that we work with an e-commerce seller, we give them accrual-based books. That way they can see this month how much did I sell, how
Mm.
much did it cost me, and how much did I make or lose on those sales? Because that's what you care
That's what
about.
you want.
Not that
Yeah,
you bought inventory 6 months ago and you're going to get paid 2 weeks from now, but
yeah.
on this sale, did I make money or not? And hopefully the answer is always yes. And if it's not,
Mm.
look into that. But then when it comes time to file the taxes at the end of the year, we will do a one-time conversion to the
Mm.
cash basis so that on the tax return, we can hopefully show that much lower profit and then as a result pay a much smaller or zero tax bill. So we do it both ways, serving two purposes. It's the same data, the same numbers. It's just not, it's allowed and legitimate,
Mm.
but it's just like in certain cases, right? If you want to look at miles per hour, and then in other cases you want to look at kilometers per hour. It just depends where you're driving. It's the same car going the same speed. It just depends how you count it.
Cool. Well, yeah. Just imagining going from miles to kilometers an hour from state to state. But good. All good. Um, do you have any? Do you have any education, or do you know a good place that people can learn about this? Because I think like a basic like knowledge of accounting is super useful, especially as you get in. I didn't know knew nothing when I started my e-commerce business 10 years ago, and then learned I had to do accrual accounting because in the UK when I started I had a UK business and everything's accrual if you're doing a product-based business. But like learning that my where is the money? If I look at the balance sheet, the money is now no longer in cash; it's in inventory. So if you can read a balance sheet, you know where your money is, for example.
Right.
Do you have any
Yeah,
education in that space?
I've put together a series of videos that kind of start from the most basic sort of here's a very basic income statement with three things on it, right? You made a sale, you had an expense, you have a profit, and then it expands. And likewise from the balance sheet, you put some cash in and then you've got some cash in the bank. That's your asset, your equity, and it expands from there. I made those videos to kind of walk through it for our clients, and we happy to share with anybody who's interested because I
Mm.
really never could find any good resources that started at that level, but by the end of 20 or 30 minutes got to the point where, okay, now I can see how this relates to a balance sheet and I can use it. It was
Mm.
either, Accounting 101 that was a 12-week course that went into debits and credits, and nobody should have to suffer through that. Or it was very specific to an industry or too high level that you couldn't kind of get on board and pick up how the logic worked. It started out too quickly and was too high level right out of the gate.
Mm.
So we did, I did do some videos starting out just intending to help our clients, but again, I think we shared them, and I can find some links and send them to you. But
Awesome.
yeah, that it really is helpful to understand. It's not super complicated once you've seen it. It's just not something you can look at and get without some help along the way.
Yeah.
It's not something you can self-teach just by studying a balance sheet. Just look at it really hard and figure it out. It doesn't follow rules that you can just sort of intuit
Mm.
or infer just by visualizing it.
Well, that's great. Yeah, the best education I did on it in the past was Keith Cunningham had some really good stuff on it. Keith Cunningham, the road less stupid, the keys
Yep.
to the vault guy. But it takes like 2 hours, and it is relatively complex. But he shows you where all the numbers link between all of the different reports and where you need to check that everything lines up.
It's kind of cool if you're, especially when it's your business and you kind of see, oh, okay, yeah, that starts to make sense. And I can see how looking at this would be helpful. A lot of people kind of come at it from like, oh, I'm not a numbers person. Oh, I don't get numbers. I don't like numbers, which I somewhat understand. However, e-commerce in particular is a very data-driven, numbers key business. So you have to learn to love it enough to be able to at least manage it in your own business. I mean, you don't go out and do calculus on the weekends for fun. That's fine. But in your own business, know enough of the data to be able to make good decisions, because seat of the pants will only get you, so far, and then it starts to become really challenging.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Lesson I learned: the more high level, the more sophisticated business owners I meet, they just talk about numbers. It's just about assigning capital and moving things around and hiring the right people and knowing what budgets you have.
Right.
Past 5-10 million. Okay. So what are some of the strategies that you can apply, that our listeners can apply to, get max savings on their taxes?
So, I mean, I think there's a few things. One is, try not to wait till the last minute, right? Because once it's into the new year,
Mm.
you're kind of locked into whatever results you got, whatever steps you took, you're kind of stuck with that for the prior year. So tax planning isn't something you have to do all the time, but 3 or 4 times a year, once a quarter, it would be good to check in and kind of see, are we having a better year than last year? Are there any new strategies that I should be thinking about? Maybe I put a retirement plan in place. Maybe I switch from an LLC to an S Corp if you're in the US. Various things that at a certain level don't make sense, but then you kind of level up to where, okay, that strategy now is something I should implement. If you do that, you'll know that by the end of the year, one, there won't be any surprises about how much you're going to end up owing, and two, you've put in place everything that makes sense for your level to maximize tax savings. There's nothing, I think, more disappointing than hearing in February or March, hey, you should have done X, Y, and Z. It would have saved you 50 grand, but now it's too late, so I guess you're just stuck writing that big check. Are you sure that no, there's nothing you can do? So being a little bit more proactive. I know it's not anybody's favorite subject. Nobody's, laying awake at night dreaming about how they can talk more of taxes. But
Apart from you.
intermittently checking in, right, that's probably the number one thing you can do to be ahead of the game, as opposed to always kind of playing catch up and always wishing you'd done something last year that now it's too late to do.
Cool. And is there anything like, I don't know if you can say this, exciting gray area in the tax state? Like, oh, this is the best way we can legally kind of avoid taxes and also not go to prison. Is there anything in America? I mean, move to Puerto Rico? Does that work?
I mean, we have had clients who have moved to Puerto Rico, and I mean, if you can pull it off, and not everybody's lifestyle accommodates being able to pick up and move to Puerto Rico, but it literally is 4% tax as opposed to, like I'm in California, so we've got federal rate plus the max rate in California is another 13%. You can get to a point where you're at 50% tax rate, which is just, really depressing. So even for me, just if, moving across the border to Nevada with no state tax would be a significant savings. And then as you get bigger, there's more and more vehicles and opportunities for different things that you can put into place. If you're able to, you know, move and even be internationally active, we've had clients who've relocated to their business to Hong Kong, Cyprus, and other places for various reasons. And, you know, and we have lots of digital nomad types of clients who are able to move things around. So, you know, it depends where you're coming from, where you're at. The U.S. actually, in some regards, is, you know, there are things you can do to really cut back on the amount of taxes versus some places like in Europe where they're, you know, it's a high tax place to live. The U.S. has some amount of flexibility and things you can do, but you know, it's hard to give sort of generic advice. Everybody's situation is different, but again, that proactive planning can go a long way, especially if, you know, you've got an exit coming. Right? Maybe you live in a high tax state like I do, but you know next year I'm planning to sell my business. It's going to be a mid seven figure sale. Well, gosh, now you really might want to consider moving to Nevada long enough to, you know, 180 days and an extra day to get past that, you know, and then see what that savings does for you. And then if you want to come back, come back. But, you know, you don't want to think about that, you know, 2 weeks out from the close. You're about to get the check. Well, now it's, again, too late, and the cost of not moving is pretty heavy.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right on Europe living there. Like the crazy, no, crazy thing about the US is that
There
they
are crazy things. That's fine.
tax your passport. You know, you're taxed based on citizenship. Like, so, you know, even if you live abroad and you're just a nomad, unless you can prove things, you're still going to have to. You can have your offshore living allowance of 120 or 130 plus living expenses, but if you're making real money, it's not that much.
Right.
But at least you're only taxed outside of California on. There's like a flat rate almost, isn't there? It's like 30%. Is that right? Something like that.
Yeah.
State. Whereas in Europe, it tends to just ramp up and up and up, and I think you're at 55% or something by the time you're at 150 grand. And 150
Right.
in the US at the moment, because US everything seems to be going so up, isn't that much? But in Europe, that would put you in the top 2% probably,
Right.
which is crazy.
Yeah. And then, I mean, to be fair, right, in Europe, a lot of the healthcare and education and other things are much less expensive or free. So it's very hard to apples compare. But, you know, there
No, it's
certainly
very hard
are.
to get rich in Europe. I think it's very hard to get
Right.
rich in Europe because you're taxed so aggressively as it gets higher. But if you're outside the country, they can't tax you anymore because you're not taxed based on citizenship and passports. So ideally, you need to, I don't know, move to Dubai and not be give up your US passport. I don't want to live in Dubai. I've been there.
Yeah, well, I'll pass. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. I was like my friends there, and she's like, "Oh, it's so good, it's so good." And I was like, "What's out the window?" "Oh, yeah, that's the smog. That's why it's white outside. 40 degrees." I'm happy living where I live, but it's more like southern Florida weather and southern California weather, so it's a little bit more humid.
Yes.
Cool. So, tax season is now, isn't it? I know my Delaware thing is due in like 3 days or 2 days. When is tax season, and when should people be getting ready for next tax season?
Yeah, so the business returns are generally due March 15th and personal returns April 15th, and then with some variation for states and certain entities, but generally March 15th, April 15th. So, I mean, you know, again, it's kind of too late for whatever happened in 2025. Although, you know, again, working with an e-commerce specialist, if let's say your current CPA was always filed you on accrual, we convert you to cash. It's not too late to do those things. So it's still worth the conversation. But then really it's okay for 2026 and beyond. What things can we put in place? How do we maximize this? So like I said, tax is something to check in on once a quarter. Spend just a little bit of time to make sure that you're in the right place. So that way, when it does come to the year end, it's no big stress. You're already kind of in good shape to have maximized everything you could do.
Love it. And I guess the last bit is how do they have a conversation with you? If somebody wants to have a conversation with Matt or CapForge and learn about their their situation? What's the best next step for them to take?
Yep. So I'd say the best thing to do is check out the website capforge.com, and you can see the various services we offer. But then right there, there's a contact form. You can submit your info. It'll, come to either myself or one of the people on the team here. We can immediately kind of reach out, figure out what you've got going on, see if we can help, see if we can improve from what you've currently got going. And if it all makes sense, love to work with new clients all the time. We're always growing and expanding and adding clients, and happy to talk to anybody. There's no cost, no obligation. Just have a conversation. If we can help, great. If we can't, no problem.
Love it. I would definitely suggest talking to Matt. I've been through so many bookkeepers. Like I thought getting a book. No, I always thought getting a bookkeeper would be easy, and I've had so many people do our books. We aren't an ecom business these days. Otherwise, I would use CapForge. But yeah, it's been a painful process in the last 2 years of bookkeeping, and I would love if I could just give it to somebody and not have to worry about it.
Yes, no, it is. It is challenging to find a good bookkeeper, which was, why I started this all those years ago, because I kept hearing the same thing that bookkeepers, they don't get back to me, the quality isn't good, the price doesn't make sense, they're charging hourly or something, and I never know how many hours they're going to charge me for. There was a million, people saying something along the lines of the bookkeeping options I have aren't good. So I said, well, let's fix that. And it's been a great ride ever since.
Love it. And yeah, you've 14 years in with this particular service. What were you doing before?
I was brokering businesses, and prior to that I had some software that I was doing, and prior to that I was consulting. I owned a restaurant for a while. I've done a lot of stuff. It's been a long, crooked, weird journey to get here. It's always been some form of small business. I've always worked with small business owners, never been in that big corporate world, but in various capacities. But this, I kind of really found a home with what I like, where I could help the most, where we could really be a good asset to the community, and loving it ever since.
Oh, I love it. Thanks, Matt. Always love you having you on the show. And if anyone is out there and is looking for bookkeeping, go check out CapForge, CapForge.com, and talk with Matt and the team. Thanks for being here, Matt.
Thank you.